I'm going to say it's 8:42. We're just sort of in that stretch to a gray area where we're getting close to. I try to round up or down when I'm giving the timeout in the morning. I'm sure there are people out there who are trying to, synchronize their watches. Does anybody actually carry a watch any longer? No, you got a cell phone that's a cell phone is now a watch, and a cell phone is a flashlight. It's got all of those little interesting additions to it that people use, and so they're able to cut out some of these other things. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Do want to point out you can reach our program today. Telephone number 736-0300, 736-0300. My email address is bill.colley at townsquaremedia.com. That's bill.colley at townsquaremedia.com. I don't give out the email address, I suppose, nearly enough. So I'm trying to get back in the habit of doing that. I think when I first moved here in the early days, I did it a lot because I figured people needed to know how to spell the name in order to send the email, and I've just been somewhat lax about it ever since then. I was just chatting with Dan Tom before he left the studio and talking about my diet. And I'm probably somewhere now in the area. I'll know maybe a little bit more next week in the area, being pretty close to having dropped 70 pounds since the end of September. The total body transformation system is a way that you can lose weight in a healthy way. Some of these fad diets, you might see some quick results in the beginning, and you're not doing yourself any good uh, because afterwards you've got maybe health issues that are involved. I think I shared that story one time on the air about the Atkins diet. It can benefit some people, but it didn't benefit me at all. I mean, it got frightening after a while. So I needed a healthy alternative, and that was the total body transformation system, which is supported, in fact, by scientists working at some of the most prestigious universities in the United States: Columbia, Cornell, and Tufts among those. The total body transformation system has been proven scientifically to burn 6 times more fat, and you'll lose 8 times more weight than normal results from diet and exercise alone. The meal replacement plan, healthier than most of the meals you were actually eating, and while losing weight, you can still have a healthy amount of calories. I stopped yesterday, and I had my big meal of the day was lunch, and I stopped at Culver's. I have to admit that I have an affinity for a lot of these restaurants in town. It's probably why I needed the diet. But I had a grilled chicken sandwich and medium fries, and then you can have something along the lines of an iced tea. But the grilled chicken sandwich and the medium fries are about 650 calories, which fits in perfectly with the number of calories I'm allowed per day. In fact, I still would have some more room in there, but after I had my chicken and fries, I didn't need anything more. The average participant will drop 22 pounds and lose 4 inches off their waist in just 60 days. And I wanted to point out, too, as well, it's backed up with an unconditional full money back guarantee. People ask me about price. Well, let me tell you, the price of the replacement is about the same as what you'd be spending on the groceries that you're replacing. You can learn more by contacting marketing executive Don Chandler. He's here in Twin Falls. The number 208-731-3560. That's Don Chandler at 731-3560. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story, and I thank you for spending some time with us. As I mentioned, Idaho Fish and Game, Kelton Hatch will be joining us in a few minutes. We've got a lot to talk about with Kelton because we're going to be talking about winter seasons. This has been an expensive year. I read where the city of Nampa, Idaho alone has spent nearly $600,000 in snow removal and the like and road repairs because of this winter. And that's likely comparable to the rest of the state. But this winter has been tough on a lot of herds of animals, and that means Fish and Game has been out there working and trying to remedy some of these situations. That carries an expense, and not always a foreseen expense. And yes, there were a record number of licenses sold last year, which is a great thing. It helps fund a lot of these programs that Fish and Game is involved with, but it's not necessarily keeping pace. So we've got a lot to talk about. Also, there's some discussions about they're still looking for some input from the public on some various issues involving hunting and fishing, and that'll be coming along. We won't have time to get into too much depth about some of the things going on in Washington, but gosh, the whirlwind that has been the first few weeks of the Trump administration really picked up in its speed yesterday. As I mentioned earlier in the show, General Kelley at Homeland Security issued an order telling the folks at INS that anybody who has been here illegally under 2 years will not be getting a court hearing before deportation. In other words, if you're picked up and you've only been here 23 months and 10 days, you're getting a ticket back down to Mexico or wherever in Central and South America you may have come from, or whatever foreign country in Asia or Africa or Europe. But you got to mention those in there, because otherwise the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals will get angry and claim that you're just targeting certain people. Kelly's order will obviously be challenged, and it will obviously be, the liberals are getting very good at using the courts. What they can't get done otherwise, they're trying to use the courts and find courts that will go along with them. So they cherry pick these courts and file these cases, which is why I said in the previous half hour, we need Neil Gorsuch, and we need Neil Gorsuch soon. And it's likely that Ruth Bader Meinhof isn't going to be on the court for another year or two. And when she's gone, then President Trump will have an opportunity to really turn that court into a very originalist constitutionalist court, which it has long not been, not since the 1930s, since Franklin Roosevelt was able to pack it with people who supported the New Deal and the changes, the unconstitutional changes that brought to the country. 8:48 right now. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 24. LGBTQ QRSTUVWXYZ activists were outside the White House yesterday. Hey, hey, ho, ho, Donald Trump has got to go. In 50-some years of protests in this country, can't they come up with something better than hey, hey, ho, ho? And then you just fill in the blank, whatever it is you're complaining about. And they were waving their rainbow flags. This had nothing to do with General Kelly's order on illegal immigrants. This is from Reuters. Trump, a Republican who took office last month, rescinded those guidelines. They're referring to the potty bill that Mr. Obama, remember, he demanded that schools across the country, he said, well, if a little boy thinks he's a little girl and vice versa, they should be able to use whatever potty they like in whatever locker room they like, because we here in the Democrat Party haven't finished sexualizing your children at a very young age. Well, Mr. Trump has issued an order rescinding those regulations, even though they had been put on hold by a federal judge, arguing that states and public schools should have the authority to make their own decisions without federal interference. Now, for some people out there, you would like Mr. Trump to stop this nationwide. I think he's acknowledging that out in San Francisco, as Michael Savage calls it, the moms and dads out there would like to sexualize their children at a young age and tell them that their identity is fluid. So they likely will have their schools go along with this so that you can have more, rapes and teenage pregnancies and things like that going on in our schools. Well, liberals like that sort of stuff. It helps destroy the American family unit, and you can't rebuild society in the same way that Pol Pot did in Cambodia without this sort of thing from going on, which he's got to be a hero of American liberals from coast to coast. But what Mr. Trump's order does say is that in places like Idaho and Utah and Wyoming and Nebraska, where people still have what you would call traditional moral values, what they're saying is this is going to come to a stop. And you will be, in other words, I think it's been under the radar here for a long time, but I think the school board here in Twin Falls made some efforts to fudge who are boys and girls last fall. I don't think it got a lot of attention. However, parents who might object to this will now have the ability, because yes, at least at the school board level, as moms and dads, you do have the ability to go in and express your viewpoints. And no matter how kooky school administrators, and that's not saying they're kooky here, but no matter how kooky school administrators are in some parts of the country, when parents show up en masse to school board meetings and those board members look around, they start to get a little nervous. And when the board members get nervous, the school administrators get nervous. And then you can bring them back to reality in these situations. I saw a story the other day where a high school student in Virginia, which used to be a very patriotic place, he had two flags flying from the back of his pickup truck in the student parking lot. One was a Gadsden flag and one was the American flag, and he was called in and said, remove the flag. He said, are you talking about the Gadsden flag? And they said, no, the American flag. It may offend somebody. Well, once again, you had some liberal, and they're usually, when I hear about these people, I usually have a vision that comes to my mind. Remember the psychologist in the original Miracle on 34th Street, the nervous little man, always twirling his mustache and, and whining. And The guy that Santa Claus whacks over the head with a cane because he's such a bad dude. That's who I think is these nervous little people are running these schools, and they see an American flag, and because somebody here illegally says it makes them feel uncomfortable, oh, we better take down the American flag. We'll pretend we have no country at all. We'll all sing John Lennon's Imagine, and maybe Kumbaya as well, and then everybody will get along so well. And boys, you're girls, and girls, you're boys, and let's all have that sing-along. Parents in that school district were appalled that somebody would be told not to fly the American flag. They showed up at the school board meeting, and the school board members sat there doing their best Jackie Gleason, hemina, 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 hemina. And with that, they backed down. He can now fly the American flag from his pickup truck. That's what it takes, is your activism in all of this. Also, there's a school on Staten Island. That's a borough of New York City. The joke is that Staten Island, what are there, 7 boroughs in New York? That Staten Island is like an island that could be Alabama buried in the middle of New York City. Staten Island is home to a great many of New York City's police officers, firefighters, and emergency responders. They are not as liberal. The line of work they do really has an impact on this because they see how liberalization of criminality has only made things worse on our streets. So they tend to be a little bit more conservative, not only in their politics, but also in their lifestyles. And they all pretty much live out on Staten Island. Father says his little girl, 6th grade girl, came home the other day, and she had a word puzzle, and she was told that part of her assignment was to fill in the blanks in sentences. 2 of the sentences dealt with politics. One was about our great benighted, and is benighted the right word? Okay, I don't know. You'll have to look that up, you grammarians, and tell me. But our great former dear leader, Barack Hussein Obama, it was all about how great he was, and you had to add a word in the sentence that was missing. And the other sentence was about that no good, miserable, bigoted, hater, fascist Donald Trump. And the father looked at this and he thought, why are they trying to do this to my children? Teachers in some cases are just like Mika Brzezinski. They need to tell you what to think. Because you might think on your own, and that would be dangerous. They can't have that. So the father has gone to the school and to the media, and they really hate it when someone goes to the media. Well, why would you have to do that? Some years ago, I was having an issue with a power company, and they were coming by my house and reading the meter, a utility. Coming by the house, and they did natural gas and they did electricity, and they were a monopoly in the area that I lived. And my daughter had just been born; she was a few months old, and all of a sudden, we got a letter from these people telling us we owed them $850 because they hadn't bothered to read the meter for 2 years, and they came out to read it and realized we'd been using more power than they thought we'd been using. They'd been sending us estimated bills, and they said, you got to pay this or else we're going to come out and shut things off while you've got this little girl 3-4 months old. So I wrote the New York State Attorney General's office. I was living in what's called Central New York at the time. I had a job working in radio broadcasting there. And I wrote the AG's office because I'd asked for an explanation from the utility, and the utility sent me a sheet of paper with a bunch of decimal points and numbers, and that was it. And I wrote the AG's office and said, look, my wife and I both went to college, but we can't figure out what this explanation is. And the AG's office apparently put in a phone call to the local utility. I was at work one day when I got a call from a guy at the utility screaming at me, why did you have to go to the Attorney General's office? Well, why wouldn't I? That's none of your business. The Attorney General's office approached them and said, well, according to law, if you don't read the meter for 2 years, it's not his fault. So he doesn't have to pay this. And they were infuriated with me. And then he suddenly realized on the telephone, of course, he'd called me at work. He suddenly put 2 and 2 together who I was. And I was one of the top reporters in town. He said, this isn't going to go on the air, is it? I don't know. Call me a few more names. And how they turn around, turn tail, and run. How dare you tell somebody we were doing something wrong and illegal? And they don't like it when people go to the media. But in New York City, this teacher is going to be disciplined. They'll never lose their jobs. Not under the current climate, but is going to be disciplined for what she's done. And of course, it'll be the bad dad who reported her, and it'll be the bad media that reported it. But they won't feel that they're in any way responsible because, well, liberalism, golly gee, is a self-evident truth, don't you know? We've got a short break on the way in just a couple of minutes. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. On this snowy and windy morning, we're at 24. I don't think this snow is going to melt anytime soon. There is snow again in the forecast Monday and Tuesday. And by the time we get to the middle and late part of next week, we'll have very gradual warm ups over the freezing mark. So we're looking at temperatures most likely that are still going to be, well, not fun to deal with, but there won't be a rapid flooding warm up coming. Just a quick note, I wanted to tell you about our friends at Western Visions Inc. And I've been mentioning on the air the last couple of weeks about seeing some of the work that Western Visions is doing. These are people who are, they're right now renovating a private lodge in Cassia County, and I got to tour it. Whether the kids are now old enough to turn that nursery into a new extension of the home's entertainment space, or it is finally time to do something real and fun with a basement, or that extra bedroom nobody has ever used, a home bar, lounge, game room, or combination space can be a truly rewarding addition to any home. And I need to point out Western Visions does high-end renovations. So if you have a beautiful old historic home, they will restore it, and they will do it with the old historical character. At Western Visions, they appreciate having fun and know that your home could be one of the best places to have a great time. And they also do lots of work just with kitchens and bathrooms. You've got to take a look at some of the work at the website, western-visions.com. That's western-visions.com. One more hour of the program ahead. Kelton Hatch from Idaho Fish and Game on the way after 9 o'clock news from Fox.